Yes, we have enough people to talk about stuff. I am Crazy Uncle Floyd here at Airkooled Kustoms, and I build the engines. I do other stuff here, but my long suit is I build the engines. And if there is something that you have a particular interest in, I will be glad to talk about that if I know anything about it. If nobody has a particular interest in anything, then I'm just going to talk about general Volkswagen stuff.
I have a question.
Sure.
Splitting in case.
Okay.
Do you need a case splitter, or is there another way to do it without a case splitter?
I have a case splitter.
Well, I figured you would.
I went and bought a case splitter. I have taken them apart with screwdrivers.
Okay.
I would buy a case splitter.
Yeah.
They're about $9.
Yeah.
You know what they look like?
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody know what a case splitter looks like? I'll show you real quick. When you turn this nut, and it makes this thing open and close. And you would put it right where the oil pump goes, sideways like that. And then you'd start cranking it, and it'll just start taking that case apart. On a type 1 case, it's really easy because you got 10 fasteners around the outside plus 6 great big main studs on the main bearings. So you can count it, say, I got 16, everything's good. On a type 4, there are fairies involved. And they will move those bolts, they will hide them under stuff where you can't find them. And when you put the case splitter on there and you go to start tightening it and it's going, then stop, right there. There's a bolt somewhere that you missed. If you're going to split a case, I would get a case splitter. If you're only going to do it one time and you live close, I might lend you mine. But I would, if you mess up these machine surfaces, then it's going to leak oil forever. And Volkswagens, even the Volkswagen books will tell you they're supposed to leak oil. They can leak up to a quart of oil in 1,000 miles and still be within spec according to Volkswagen. Because the way they're put together, everything's rubber seals and things that move, and it will leak. I mean, they're like Harley-Davidson motorcycles. They're going to let you know where they've been. A lot of people do their own maintenance, and if you're going to do your own maintenance, you're going to adjust your own valves. And if you're going to do that, you're going to do it every 3,000 miles when you change your oil. And those are the two most important things that you can do with your Volkswagen. Change the oil every 3,000 miles and keep your valves adjusted. If you don't do either one of those things, you will not live long. The trick to getting your valves adjusted is getting it to #1 cylinder, which is the one closest to the passenger seat in the front of the car. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. You want #1 cylinder at top dead center, so that the piston is as far to the top as it's going to be, and it's ready for the boom spark plug to hit it, and everything's going to happen. But how do you find top dead center? Well, there's a couple of 3 different ways. One is you've got a pulley on the front that has it written right on there, and it says top dead center, and you go, easy peasy. Another way to do it is, well, this is an aftermarket distributor. Most of them would have a little line cut right in the top edge of this distributor, and if the rotor is pointing at that little line, it's at top dead center. On this one, it's right there. Let me see, we're at top dead center. The rotor is pointing to the little line that would be right in the top of the distributor cap right there. And this piston is all the way up. If you have a question about that, you can pull your spark plug and take a screwdriver and put it down the spark plug hole, and dink, you're going to hit the top of that piston. So when you get your piston to #1, top dead center, then you're ready to start adjusting your valves. Now, almost everybody here, their valves are all going to adjust to 6,000s. There are some special Volkswagen engines, or if you've got a hot engine, you know you've got a special Volkswagen engine or a hot engine, and it's going to adjust to something else. But if all you've got is just a straight up Volkswagen engine, it's going to adjust to 6,000s. You use feeler gauges to adjust your valves. So you go through, there would be cylinders here, there would be heads on this, there would be rocker assemblies, everything is the engine. You just pop the valve cover off. So you want to find your 6,000. You put it between the top of the valve and the top of the rocker. I've got a rocker somewhere. And if this just slides, you're sweet. If you're worried that maybe that's not quite right, get your 8/1000ths and see if you can fit it in there. If you can fit it in there, then your valves are too loose. You would rather have loose valves than tight valves. If you get one, if you hear one pop, 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 adjust your valves. So you can find top dead center by either reading your pulley, or if you've got a stock pulley, it's going to have a spot. It may not have numbers and degrees, but it's going to have a spot that's telling you that's top dead center. And then when you're adjusting valves, you need another mark that is bottom dead center. Because you'd adjust number 1, and you've got 2 valves here. Number 1 cylinder is top dead center. Set them at 6/1000ths. Feels perfect. It's got a little lock nut, 13 millimeter, might be 14, depends on if you have Mexican heads. And you tighten that down, and that'll hold your 6/1000ths. Then you rotate counterclockwise, 180 degrees. So we go to bottom dead center, which brings number 2 piston all the way up, and it's ready to have its valves adjusted. So you'd adjust 6/1000ths, 6/1000ths, intake and exhaust valves. And when you feel that that's right, you lock them down, and then you check them again. And when you're done with this side, put the valve cover back on. Put a new gasket in. Always put a new gasket in. Bring the bail up, you're done. Now you're going to number 3. So you're going to go counterclockwise, 180 degrees. And now, number 3 is all the way out. And it's ready to have its valves adjusted. 6/1000ths. Intake and exhaust. When they feel good, lock them down. Then you 180 thousandths again, going counterclockwise. And you're at number 4. And it's ready to have its valves adjusted. 6/1000ths. 180 again. And you're back to number 1 top dead center, and you're done. Okay, let's, questions?
No, it's a lot easier than I expected to be.
Now, some of you folks may be bus people or late beetle people. You might be hydraulic lifter people. Completely different deal. We're still going to start on number 1 top dead center. We're going to bring this all the way up. You've got your rocker assemblies in here that you just set to 6/1000ths on the other engine. When you have hydraulic lifters, you take the adjusting nut, back it off, and you turn that screw until it just touches. You can feel. You'll put your thumb on the rocker. You want to take all the slack out, make sure your push rod is going all the way down to the lifter, and then you just let that adjuster touch the top of that valve. When you get to that point, you crank it in 2 complete revolutions, lock it down. That puts a charge on the hydraulic lifter inside the engine. 180 degrees, you do number 2, just until it touches, and then 2 complete revolutions, lock it down. Rotate it all the way around, 3 and 4. When you're done with that, you're done. Now some folks will tell you that you don't have to adjust hydraulic lifters. Those people do not have hydraulic lifters. Because if you have hydraulic lifters, you know you have to adjust them. Now, on a regular air-cooled engine, every 3,000 miles, it's like a religious thing. On a hydraulic engine, when it starts sounding a little different, it's time. And it could be 15, 20,000, could be 60,000, but there's going to be a time when you're going to have to readjust those valves. And if you ever take any of this stuff apart, you got to readjust those valves. That's valves. Air-cooled engines are not really cooled by the air. They're cooled by the oil. And as the oil pumps, the air helps. You got to have the air. If you don't have the air, it will die. But it'll die a whole lot quicker without oil. The oil not only provides lubrication, it provides heat transfer. In a lot of engines that have auxiliary oil coolers, stuff like that, the temperature of the oil is critical to the life of the engine. So you want to keep your tin in good shape so that the air all works and flows and goes the way it's supposed to. And you want to, every day when you go out there to start that Volkswagen, and if you don't go start it every day, it's not going to start. Everybody that's got one knows that. If you don't drive it, it won't drive. So you go out, you start it. Before you start it, check the oil. If it's within, I like to keep mine 1/8 of an inch below full. Just because if you get above full, you're getting into issues with your rear main seal. 1/8 of an inch below, no issues anywhere. Plenty of oil for lubrication and heat transfer. Everything is happy.
What oils do you recommend? What oils do you recommend?
Here at the shop, what we use is Castrol 20W50 with Lucas oil engine break-in additive. Lucas is key. As oils have changed over the years with applications, zinc has been removed from the oil. Well, that works fine with the great big engines of today, but the little bitty engines of yesterday need that zinc. So we use Lucas engine oil additive in 20W50 Castrol. The book says you should use straight 30 weight. The book probably knows a whole lot more about it than I do. We use 20W50. Anytime you change your oil, if you have a filter, change the filter. Do not just change the oil and run on that old filter, because the filter is where the gunk that you're trying to get out of your engine is. So you want to throw that away. Got two kinds of ignition on a Volkswagen. You're going to have your Kettering points and electronic ignition. The point system has been around for over 100 years, and most everybody knows how to do it. It has to do with the arm and the spark that it generates that come out here that goes to the spark plug. Electronic ignition. You guys got to let me work now. I love you. I am crazy Uncle Floyd, although he's not my nephew. I met him today. They're all my nephews. So I am somebody's crazy Uncle Floyd.
CUF, okay.
Crazy Uncle Floyd. Go. Okay, so that's distributors, valves, oil. Have we got a question?
When you change the oil and the filter and stuff, do you check it with a magnet, see if there's any parts or anything like that, or do you do anything like they do with other?
Most everybody who has a Type 1 engine has the drain plug in the bottom, and the drain plug in the bottom has a magnet on it. So when you drop that drain plug out, the first thing you want to do is take your rag and wipe, because that could be sludge, it could be oil residue, it could be leftover white grease from when I put your engine together that got caught there. You rub it on a rag and you see, do I have any metal particles in there? If you have metal particles in there, you start saving money, because you're soon going to be buying an engine. But almost everyone will have a magnet in the bottom that will collect whatever can be collected. And that's going to be little chunks off your rockers, little chunks off your rods, little chunks off your crank, places where you don't want to lose little chunks. But if they're floating around in your engine, you definitely want them all in one spot. When the bearings wear out, there is no material that a magnet will attract. But you'll notice things like, how much does it move front and back? That's called the in play. If there's a whole bunch of that, be saving that money, because you're going to be buying an engine.
I have a two-part with the oil. The screen, do you need to clean the screen every time?
Clean the screen every time.
Okay, so do the 6 bolts around it instead of just the plug.
Now, that is the best thing that you can do for your Volkswagen, is take care of that oil. Now there's a drain plug in the bottom,
Correct.
and depending on your ability and your desires and whatnot, you may want to only drop the screen every other oil change.
Okay.
But don't go past that. I like to take them off every single time, clean everything, wire wheel everything up, new gaskets, put it all back together, inspect the screen, make sure it doesn't have a hole in it, something like that. Anything you can do that is good for your oil is good for your Volkswagen.
Then if you're running an external external oil cooler, would you also run the screen in tandem?
Yes.
Oh.
Because, well, the oil cooler, usually when you have an auxiliary oil cooler, you're also, depending on the engine, if it's Type 1, you're also going to have an auxiliary oil filter somewhere. And ideally, that oil filter is going to be where all the gunk you want out of your engine winds up. But on many occasions, when I drop the inspection pan, off the bottom of one of these engines, right here, you'll find chunks of stuff that your magnet picks up, and so you know that bad things are happening. You do not want those chunks to get pulled in and directed to your oil pump that is a very machined surface. If it doesn't work just right, it doesn't work at all. And if it doesn't work at all, your engine doesn't work at all. So you can imagine what would happen if a big old chunk of metal comes in here between these machine teeth, locks everything up. You're in trouble. So it's just easy to go ahead and put your screen in, clean it at least every other time. Keep good oil with you, carry oil with you. Carry at least a quarter oil with you. I carry more than that, but I'm paranoid, I'm scared. But carry oil with you. Check it before you start the engine. If it starts making weird noises, that's the first thing you want to check. One thing you can do if you don't know if your engine is running hot or not is you've just been driving down the road and you just pulled into the gas station, you open up the back and you grab the dipstick. If you can grab that dipstick and look at it, your oil's running fine. If you grab that dipstick and you jump back real quick, you might think about maybe my timing's off, maybe my valves need adjusted, because you're supposed to be able to grab the dipstick. If you can't grab the dipstick, something's not right. And if it involves heat, sooner rather than later is when you want to find out what's wrong.
What about an engine oil temperature gauge? I've read where they'd use an Air Force or an aviation type temp gauge on one of these.
There are a couple of different locations that you can put one. 225 degrees is ideal oil temperature. You don't want it to go over 250 ever. It depends on the kind of driver that you are. Volkswagen, they will keep it simple. You know, put the key in. If those two little lights come on, then we're good to go. Start her up and let's roll. If those lights go on, if they come on again while I'm driving down the road, something's wrong. I love you. I'll see you in a minute. It's not easy being crazy Uncle Floyd. And then having a senior moment, you know, you just sit here
Back
and
to
go,
the oil temperature gauge.
oil temp gauge, okay. A lot of people just keep it simple. I got two lights. If one of them comes on, I got a problem. Somebody else wants to monitor the temperature of this particular head, or they want to know what the oil temperature is, or they want to know. There's a lot of information that is available that is good to know, but if you don't know how to process it, you'll just wind up scaring the hell out of yourself. I recommend that unless you have a burning desire to know, stay with stock Volkswagen. Do it with idiot lights. If you want to add something, get a head temp sensor. That's a good thing to have. It'll tell you if things are going bad and how bad they're going. You want to have an oil pressure gauge. It's a good thing to have, because if you run out of oil, you won't know it. That light doesn't come on until you get to 3 psi. 3 psi is hardly enough oil to lubricate anything. If it comes on and you're doing 70 miles an hour, you're in trouble. But if you're bopping along at 70 miles an hour and you're over here looking at your oil pressure gauge, and all of a sudden that rascal that used to be sitting there at 30 and now it's sitting at 25 and it's heading towards 20, you're looking for an off-ramp. You're going to pull over and make sure that you have enough oil. You just adjusted your valves. You just put your new valve cover gaskets in. You've been on the road for 20 minutes. Those valves, they are leaking like a sieve, because if you don't get your valve cover gaskets right, they will kill your engine. It's a good idea after you adjust your valves to let your engine just sit there and idle for 5 minutes and look underneath it and make sure oil isn't pouring out like Niagara Falls. But valve cover gaskets can get you in a world of trouble. Gauges are good. If you need to know, that's the way to go. If all you want to do is just drive this Volkswagen down the road, then put gas in it, check the oil before you start it, make sure the lights work, and go. It will tell you when to slow down. If your Volkswagen starts lugging and the more you press on the gas, the slower it goes, downshift a little bit, get in the right-hand lane, slow down, and keep going. One thing you want to keep in mind on a Volkswagen engine is the fan is directly corresponding to the RPM of the engine. The engine's got to be turning to turn the fan. The fan's got to be turning to make the air work. So don't lug your engine. Volkswagens are made for high RPM being 3,000 to 4,000. Most Volkswagens redline out at about 4,200, except for this one that's going to go to 6,000 because it's special. That's the deal. Slow down. If the lights come on, pull over. If it gets hot, let it cool. Best thing I can tell you if you're a Volkswagen owner is get premium AAA insurance. You will tow for 200 miles free. And two things about a Volkswagen. If you're in a hurry, don't take a Volkswagen. If you're taking a Volkswagen, be ready for an adventure. To that end, Crazy Uncle Floyd, over and out. You bet.
When I stop at a light, after the engine's nice and warm, the little red light.
A little flicker. Well, the book says that's okay.
All right. Yeah, it doesn't seem to cause an issue. It just,
No, it scares the pee out of me, but I have done research on it. The book says that's all right.
I had a personal question. I have a 66. I actually just left the shop for that steering. When I drive it around for an hour or so, I go shut it off, run in the store, get something to drink, come back out, and it won't start, but it will jump. So I don't know, it's like an overheated generator. Is it 12-volt converter?
Coil.
The coil?
I would suggest that if you have a buddy with a Volkswagen or you have another coil, just swap them.
Okay. And
See
then
if
ride it
that
around and see.
Because if your coil gets hot, the oil inside the coil gets hot, which impedes the way that it does invisible stuff in there from low voltage to high voltage. And that can stick you at a gas station for an hour until that coil cools off, and then everything's good to go.
Yeah, because they'll either jump start it or bump start it, and it starts right on up after that.
I'd check the coil if I was you.
Okay.
And if your points, make sure they're adjusted right.
Yeah.
And if they're points, you want to adjust them to 18 thousandths. And I set all my plugs at 27 thousandths, and that lets you run cheap regular gas without